Hello everybody, and welcome. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining our first monthly community event. I'm Brian Hills, Deputy CEO of the Data Lab, and I've been leading our community initiative to get it off the ground, and now joined by Paul McMillan as well, who's our community manager and leading us going forward. So thanks for joining us this afternoon. For those who don't know us, and I know most of you probably will, but Data Lab is Scotland's innovation centre for data and AI, and our mission is to help Scotland succeed in using data for economic and social benefit for the country. And in doing that, developing a safe, open and productive community is key to our strategy. So with the launch of our community, we want to enable anyone in Scotland to connect, engage and learn from each other in their data journey, either personally or within a company. And we tend to, at the moment, think of that as almost a ladder. So there's some people that are not on the ladder, not aware of it. Some people are thinking about stepping on it. Some people are starting, and some people who are maybe way at the top. And what we have seen over the last 6 years in the Data Lab is there's so many people coming to us to say, we want to help other people move forward and get up that ladder. How do we do it? And, you know, I'd love to employ lots more people, but that's not something within our budget. So we're really work with a few people to come up with the idea of using a community to enable people to help each other, to give back, but to help each other moving forward on our own personal data journeys, wherever we might be on that journey. And really moving towards that mission of helping Scotland at scale. So being part of a community that helps each other to be successful, essentially through sharing our experiences and our networks and being honest and sharing successes and the challenges we've encountered as well. So what that is, in short, to date is we've done a minimum viable product with 20 people in February. We're running a pilot just now in July and August with 200 people, and we will launch the community in September at the same time as we do DataFest Our People. So the community aspect fits very well in with the theme for DataFest in September. And so at the moment, we are testing the platform, we are testing different ways of using it and getting user feedback, things that are not good, things that are good that we want to push forward, and developing a roadmap with things such as mentoring tools, collaboration tools, data readiness surveys, etc. And I think one key important point to stress on that as well is community at the moment is very digital because of the nature of the challenges we're facing, but we're really keen to cross over to digital and physical when the opportunity provides us to do that. So we'll be crossing over to both. And at the moment, as I mentioned, we have 200 members from primarily Scotland, but we have members from England, and two of which are joining us on our panel today. We have members from Africa and South America with connections into Scotland as well. So there's potential for us to grow it globally, which is really exciting for us. So that's kind of a background on why and what for community. A couple of housekeeping things, and let's get into the discussion. So a key part for everything we do in the Data Lab and the community is creating safe, open and productive spaces for people to collaborate, really aligned to our values of innovate, grow, support and respect. So I'd encourage you to embrace that in this session and if you're engaged with us future in the community. And as part of that, and to get the most out of this session for yourselves, we'd really encourage you to post questions to our panel. So if you can use the question and answer functionality on Zoom and post your questions up there, you could name a specific person you want to ask the question to, or I can post it to everybody on the panel. Just let us know what you'd like to know from the panel and we'll get your question answered. I've got some anchor questions to get started with, but I'd really appreciate for yourselves to post questions so that you can get the most out of the session and the experts that we have joining us today. A couple of other things to finish up on. Appreciate that many of us are still at home, so please accommodate random cats, dogs and children and anything else that might fly about. I think we're well used to that now. And finally, we'll be recording this session and we're going to post it in the community. So if you want to watch it back or you want to post questions following up to it, or you want to recommend it to somebody, we'd appreciate if you do that. So that's a bit of background, a bit of housekeeping. So let's get forward with the session. And firstly, I'll invite the panel to introduce themselves and what they do, and then I'll post the first question, and please keep posting questions as discussed earlier on. So let's kick off. First, I'll ask Matthew Sharpe to introduce himself, who is staring out the window at a nice duck pond right now. Matt.
Hi everybody, I'm staring out of the window at a nice duck pond. I'm just seeing if I can show you that. There you go. It's beautiful and countryside. I hope you can see it. I'm Matt. I'm one of the English contingent. I'm based in North Yorkshire at the moment, working remotely as a staff data scientist for Spotify. I've been at Spotify for coming up to 4 years now. I used to live in Stockholm and work for them there. And in my time at Spotify, I've only ever worked on podcasts. So I'm basically just, all I know about Spotify is that there are podcasts, and rumor has it there's music, but not certain. Prior to that, I worked for Skyscanner in Edinburgh, which is kind of what brought me into the data lab community. And then prior to that, I've basically worked as a data scientist across a bunch of different companies, mainly in the UK, and different industries as well. And prior to that, I studied physics at university. And that is me.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you very much. And thanks for joining us. And second, we have Gulsen. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, so my name is Gulsen, and I am in England, in Southend at the moment. It's brilliant, the weather, so it's a good day today. So I am a researcher and data literacy consultant, and at the moment I am with Civic Software Foundation, working as Director of Research and Learning. So Civic Software Foundation is based in the US, and I'm working with people I never seen in person. So that's the beauty of being a community, I think. I've been involved with many projects, research projects, but also applied projects on data literacy, community building, learning design. Prior to that, I also worked as a social worker. I was a trained social worker, so it's a bit of a dramatic shift, one might say, but I see lots of connected parts, what I'm doing in data literacy at the moment. And yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Gulsen. Thank you for joining us. And thirdly, we have Dave, north of the border in Edinburgh. Hi, Dave.
Hi, nice to meet everyone virtually. I wish I could point you out the window and show you a beautifully sunny day up here in Scotland, but it looks like it's clouded over a little bit. So I currently lead the data science and analytics teams at FreeAgent. Now, FreeAgent make accounting software specially designed for small micro businesses in particular. And I've been at FreeAgent now about 8 years. I originally joined as the first data scientist at FreeAgent when the company was much smaller back in 2013. And before that, I was a postdoctoral researcher in physics at the University of California, San Diego, based in Geneva in Switzerland. So maybe like many people in data science, a slight physics connection there too. And I'm looking forward to participating in the session today.
Thank you, Dave. And finally, we have Anna. Hello, Anna.
Hello, hi everyone. I'm Anna Scott, and I work at the Data Lab in the skills team, leading on our professional development programs. I'm leading a program at the moment called Data Skills for Work, which is about upskilling and reskilling across all levels of data literacy, from data citizen, data workers, data professionals, and data leaders. Before I joined the Data Lab just towards the end of 2018, so I think I had all of 4 months in the office before we went into lockdown. Before that, I worked for Scotland's doctoral training partnerships, running employability and training programs for PhD students across the arts, humanities and social sciences. I've got an undergraduate degree in art history and English literature, and a master's degree in arts and cultural management. So I've sort of come from a bit of a arts and culture background, but I've worked in universities for 20 odd years, and more recently particularly in skills programs. That's me.
Great, thank you, Anna. Thank you and welcome. And it's great to see people with different experiences, you know, in the arts, in physics, in social work coming together, and we're all on a data path of some sort of another. So let's get into some of this, and I'm going to lead off with a question really around right now. So we're all kind of continuously learning to be successful. So it'd be interesting if you could share, and maybe let's keep the same order as the introductions for this one. Maybe start with yourself, Matt. So what are you currently learning about to help you become successful or be successful in your current role, and where you want to go in the future as a data scientist?
I think the main things that I'm learning at the moment, they're all what I would call like product related. So it's less a technique, it's less even a style or anything like that. It's sort of, I guess it's the domain that I'm working in. So like I'm looking at when we render a page on Spotify, like what goes into that? What do we actually have to do before we render that page? What do we need to load? How long does each bit take to load? And therefore, can we use that profile to basically sketch out a user retention curve or something like that per load time? Well, so like that's the overall project, but really the bit that I'm learning about that I have no idea about is how you actually build an app and render a page on an app and do so for 300 plus million users. So like that kind of, like if I think at the moment about all the things that I'm learning about, it's basically I've got the data skills. It's how do I know enough about the domain that I'm about to apply them in so that I don't make a fool of myself and I successfully apply them. And so therefore I have to learn a lot about a lot of different domains in order to do so. So yeah, that's what I'm learning at the moment. Product page performance and podcast ads.
And what if I just delve into a little bit deeper, and I'll ask this of everyone, how are you going about doing that? How are you going through the process of learning? Because I guess it's good to get under the skin of that.
So for me, it's about asking lots and lots of really stupid questions of lots of very clever people. So it's basically pinging all of the people who know about this stuff, being like, okay, I think I understand level 1. Let's talk about level 2. Let's go for level 2 now. And then I'm kind of working my way up such that I gradually understand enough to be dangerous, basically. So in each of these domains, it starts with, okay, so what's money? And then you work your way up all the way through to, okay, now I understand the business model. Talk to me about this specific element. But yeah, it's entirely through talking to people who know about this stuff, basically.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Okay, so let's move on to Gulsen. Gulsen, what are you learning about just now, and what's the approach that you're taking to be successful in doing it?
Well, I think one thing I'm learning is basically learning from other people and different ways of learning. In Civic Software Foundation, we just wrapped up a 6 weeks cohort-based learning. It was an amazing experience, but we had different people coming from different areas, and we were working on understanding data and how to make the context that data was created more obvious, and how can we communicate it. So it was such a unique experience, because when you have this group of people coming from, you know, arts, anthropology, psychology, data science, product development, everyone, and then really thinking through and really understanding their point, why they're, you know, suggesting some ideas, what is the process going behind that. And I think that was one of the very amazing things I discovered, and I'm learning still how to learn from other people. And maybe the second thing related to that also, how can we learn from our lived experiences? I think when we're talking about especially data literacy in my domain, the idea of learning is very much focused on, you know, you have a computer and you have a table, then you sit on there and you listen and you take notes and you learn. And in the evening, you just close your book and that's it. But really lived experiences, I think there's something very unique to them, because you don't live your life just, you know, aiming to learn something, but something happens and then it just connects in your brain. I was like, right, okay, you know, that's something really interesting. How can I just take it into, you know, into this context, for instance, data literacy, and really communicate this lived experiences with people. Like, it's a stupid example, but I was just having a walk on a forest, in a forest, and you really realize the communication network that the trees have in the forest, and then you really realize there are some elements that they share, and they grow together, and they communicate, and they respect each other in their sense of respect. So really taking that and implementing in our ways of learning, I think that's something really unique and excites me to learn about.
Thank you, Gulsen. And it seems that questioning and communication piece for both of you so far is really important. Let's move on to Dave. So Dave, what are you learning about right now?
So
how are you tackling it?
I guess I can put out two sort of slightly different extremes. First one's a little bit meta maybe, but I think I'm learning about learning in a way, because now that I'm responsible for two teams, and we have quite a range of experiences and skill levels, in those teams, going from interns, right up to sort of senior data scientists. And I'm helping them work with the team at the moment to develop an improved progression framework, so that we can use that to think about, how do you go from leveling up from, let's say, being an intern all the way up to being a senior or principal data scientist, and how do we draw out those, those sort of threads of different skills and competencies that are needed, to make that progression, and how do we help people to see that and, to go on that journey. And so, I've been doing a bit of background reading about the subject, which ranges, I think, from, blogs and looking for other published progression frameworks that other companies and organizations are using, through, honestly, I'm not trying to be silly here, but, reading some more philosophical texts on, how do we define quality, and, what is the right amount of something to have. So I think, I find it an absolutely fascinating subject, and it's been really great, trying some things out there and getting the team involved. And so, I've been really enjoying that. That's my one extreme. The other extreme, so a few days ago, I got an email from this Kaggle thing. It's some sort of, Kaggle beginners machine learning challenge. So do you know what? I thought, well, I haven't really done any practical machine learning for ages, and I could use a bit of a refresher. So I signed up to that. So I'm going to do a month of beginner machine learning problems. I'm actually pretty excited about that too. So, it's nice sometimes to make a bit of time for, a different sort of work, just to keep that aspect alive, so you can help people a little bit more effectively with that side of things as well. So yeah, they're the two things I'm kind of excited about at the moment.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dave. And I'm sure I came across at some point, there is a podcast about how to learn about learning. And yeah, I think that meta angle is really, really useful, thanks, Dave. So Anna, what about yourself? What are you learning just now, and how are you approaching it?
Well, I'm kind of, I did a leadership program a year or so ago, and so I am kind of doing some stuff that's aligned with that. I've got a professional mentor who is kind of helping me a bit with the imposter syndrome that I experienced as somebody who's kind of fairly new to the world of data. But I feel like I'm constantly sort of learning on the job, really. Running the Data Skills for Work program has just been a great learning experience for me in terms of enabling me to get familiar with the terminology around data science and the concepts while delivering the program, and that feels right for me, as I really love an efficient use of time, being a project program manager. But I mean, I've got a list this long of all the courses and things that I wanted to do, finding the time to do that. But I have committed with one of my colleagues to start a sort of IBM introductory course to data analytics, and we thought if we did that together and worked our way through it together, then that would be a nice way to learn. But yeah, just today I was learning how to design and develop an online course. Talk about being meta. I'm really interested in how people learn and ways of learning. You know, we're trying to reach lots of different target groups through the Skills and Work programme. We're looking at ways to engage neurodiverse learners and you know, people with different abilities. So I'm always just really open to new concepts and ideas around how best to deliver the programme while educating myself at the same time.
Great, thank you. So we don't have any questions yet, so maybe we should offer some swag to influence people. So the first question I get through here, we'll send you a pair of Data Lab socks. So get posting. New socks, not my old socks that I've got in a cupboard. We'll get some new socks from the office now. We're allowed to go back in. But in the meantime, I'll move on to another one that I think is that I see quite a lot across people that I mentor and talk to, and we all. Well, you might get a thank you, Matt, as for some socks if they're in demand. I'm sure we can do that, don't we? So, transitioning in your career, I think, is something that we all come across. So we might have done a degree in some piece or education in some form in some area and then move into data or some other area, or we might be moving from junior to career to senior data scientist, or we might be moving from data scientist to leader or whatever. There's inevitably over the course of our lifetime, there's lots of different transitions, and typically we might find those transitions, they require us really to dig into and lean into the ability to learn and adapt to become successful in that transition. So I wanted to ask, and maybe start with yourself, Gulsen, if that's okay, if you could just give us an example of a transition that you've experienced so far in your career, and how did you tackle that from learning how to move into that transition and be successful?
Yeah, well, that's something really interesting, because when I tell people, you know, my clients, that I am a trained social worker, it's something really interesting, and I get this looks like, what are you doing in the data field? You know, how come you end up here? Well, the story is long, but basically, when I was working as a social worker, it was too obvious that, you know, data was really affecting my clients' lives, and I really was seeing this every day. You know, someone would create a reporting system, and then we would have to fit people's lives in these boxes when we would go to do like social analysis reports of their living environment. You know, it's something so real and so lifelike, and then you just go back to your desk and then transfer it into this spreadsheet and these boxes and, you know, things that are basically created. So that was something really, really challenging for me to do, because I always felt like there was this shortcomings of these systems that were developed. How can you really categorize a person? You know, who chooses these categories? Who is like a healthy family? Yeah, is it a yes or no question? You know, there was questions like that really challenged me, and I really wanted to, you know, do something about it, and really wanted to understand, because the idea behind is, you know, to make things more convenient. Because when you go from written reports to, you know, just this checkbox like systems, it's more convenient because you can then analyze the development, the process, and, you know, how many reports we're kind of tackling and all that. So I understand the rationale behind, but these shortcomings were too real to ignore. And I really wanted to, you know, go deep dive into this, and that's how I ended up in data literacy, basically. So in my master's thesis, I really wanted to look what data literacy is in real life and in theory, because this, you know, again, coming back from the social work, being a social worker, seeing this real life and then reading a report, you know, it never reflects the reality of people. So that's what was happening with data literacy as well, in a way. So I really see these connections, this learned kind of experiences that I would never have if I wasn't a social worker, really affecting my vision in the way I look at data literacy, the understanding that I have of it, what it can mean to people. I think I wouldn't be here if I didn't have that, you know, background in social work and really working with people on the ground. So I'm really thankful for that. And I think this, transition might be challenging. It means, but it depends how you define the challenge. If it means learning a lot, it's not really a challenge, but it's maybe an exploration journey or something more exciting. So yeah.
Thank you, Gulsen. And Dave, yourself, an example of a transition and how you approached the learning to be successful in that transition.
So, I mean, I think there's sort of probably two main transitions that I've gone through in my career at Free Agent. The first one was, joining Free Agent in the first place, where I went from working in an academic research group to a company which is got a pretty diverse mix of people, but culturally by and large is British. I mean, we're based here in Edinburgh. Most people are British in the company, whereas before I was working in a research group that was quite, it was based in America. It was a lot of Americans, a lot of Mediterranean people, basically all the people in the world who are more direct than the British, which is pretty much everybody. So, culturally, it was very different going from a scientific technical discipline, working with other scientists, who are very direct people, to actually joining Free Agent. When I started, I joined the marketing team in Free Agent. So, culturally, these were not people who are necessarily, used to using data as rigorously as, as I was in my former career in physics. And I think that was probably the most difficult transition that I went through. And it was a real struggle, for the first few years, to get used to different ways of communicating with people and different ways of influencing people in the organization than what I was used to in physics. And I certainly made a lot of mistakes in those early years. And, it took a long time to learn from them. So there was a lot of trial and error almost. So I think, the one thing there I would say would be just, to be able to be a bit introspective about things, take the time to reflect on what's gone well, what's not gone so well, what could you try next time if you find yourself in that situation. The other transition that I've gone through has been, the sort of one from an individual contributor to more of a leadership position over the years. And that's interesting as well, but it's not been like a day and night thing for me, really. It's not been the case that one day, I was senior data scientist or something like that, and somebody said, oh, hey, Dave, we'd like you to manage this team over here now. I mean, I was the data science team, for the first few years, and then we got our first intern. She was really good, so we offered her a full-time job. I was her line manager. That was my sort of introduction to line management, and then the team just gradually grew from there, and then it got to a point where it split into a couple of teams. So I think there, perhaps again, it's just about, for me, it's just been about making sure to take the time to reflect on where things are. When things change gradually, maybe you don't notice it happening piece by piece. So there, it's been using the peers internally in the company. So we have a good peer group of managers within Free Agent who help each other out with problems, advise each other. So I think again, it's been a matter of having that sort of keeping those networks and internal communities going, so when you've got a problem, you've got somebody to ask. And I think that's what's helped me a lot, just having somebody internally I know I can go to and say, hey, I'm struggling a bit with this. Can you give me some advice?
Okay, great. Thank you, Dave. And Anna, about yourself, about maybe a personal transition or transitions you see people, I guess, experience in data skills for work, whatever you feel like sharing.
I probably talk about it from a personal point of view, to be honest. I mean, I think I've sort of felt like I've had quite a few transitions in my career, but when I think back on it and look at it in a whole, there's not actually been, I've worked in higher education for a long time, and I've done quite a few roles within that sector. So it's, but maybe as Dave was mentioning there, sometimes you're working with kind of corporate services, and sometimes you're working with industry, and sometimes you're working with academics. But I think for me, what's kind of, moving to the role at the Data Lab maybe felt like it would be a really big transition for me, and I think I thought it would be a steeper learning curve than it really has been, because what's changed, or what's struck me really, is the sort of transferable and softer skills that I've gained through all the other work that I've done and how these apply in any setting, really. And so that's really helped me sort of change my mindset about it and kind of thinking, well, this is so completely different from what I was doing before. But actually, developing skills programs, project and program management, that's all stuff that I've done for a long time. And thinking about the kind of softer skills that are really important in the data world in terms of critical thinking and problem solving and communication and adaptability and things. I think that's really important, and that's really really helped me.
Thanks, Anna. Again, it's really important because so many of us on the technical side are just so focused on the data side. It's that combination, isn't it, with the communication piece. We've got a couple of questions in, so what I'm going to do, I'll just ask Matt for his reflection on transition, and let's cover some of the questions that are coming in. So Matt, if you want to give a wee summary, and I'll get into some of these questions. I think we've got about 10 minutes left. Example of a transition for you and your approach to learning?
Yeah, I'll go with two very quick transitions. One was I didn't know how to program when I left university. I was interested in programming, but I was doing some kind of like product management job. I then thought I could automate my job away. And gradually over the period of about 2 or 3 months, I automated my whole job away and then had to transition basically because the CTO was like, you don't have a job now. What are you gonna do? And so then I got introduced to data science. So that's how I became a data scientist. My transition there was just accepting that I knew the least of anybody in any room and basically using that as an opportunity to ask lots of silly questions, to learn lots of things. And then every time I join a new company, I have to learn, like, how do you actually get things done at that company? And I think that's an important thing that doesn't get talked about a lot, is just different companies have different ways that you get things done. It's not the same at all companies. And so you have to identify how you're going to get things done at that company, then get things done. And those are my transitions.
Yeah. I think there's probably a side bit or a blog or something we'll talk to you about the art of asking a silly question. As we say in the Data Lab, there's no such thing as silly question. Encourage people to ask questions. So I think that's a really important point as well. So a couple of questions that have come in. So let's pick JP. Thank you, JP, for posting. So your question was, how can career changers stand out when starting to apply interview for data roles? So transitioning in from another career, how do you differentiate yourself when you're trying to apply for your first data roles? Well, Dave, you recruit data scientists. Give us your advice, because you're a recruiter. What would you look for?
I've done a lot of recruitment, and I've seen a lot of CVs, especially at the lower end of the career spectrum. So people entering either as interns or juniors, and honestly, I think the easiest thing that you can do to stand out, and it amazes me how few people actually do this, is take a little bit of time to do a little bit of research about the company that you're applying to. And you'll either have to usually write a covering letter, or there'll be a form to fill in on the application process, and I think you've just got to let your enthusiasm and your interest in the role come across in that. We get a lot of applications that start off just saying, I'm looking for a data job. Effectively, it's I'm looking for a data job. I see you have a data job. I'm applying for your data job. I mean, if you can come up with, a bit of motivation, why you're interested in data, why you're interested in the company, what you think you can add there, and how you think, you'll be able to develop at that company, that will get the attention of the person doing the recruiter. Because that application, that initial covering letter, that's just to sort of get your foot into the door and get an interview. So what you're looking for from that, in my opinion, is to get the attention of the recruiter and make them want to speak to you more and find out a bit more about you. And for myself, when I get applications from people who have a different background, outside of the normal, but they seem very enthusiastic about the role, I always want to have a conversation with them, just because it will be interesting, if nothing else. And I think that'll get your foot in the door at most places.
Okay, thanks, Dave. And I'll post that one to Anna as well, because you're involved in helping others upskill and reskill, and there's a lot of transitioning as well. So what would your advice be for career changers and standing out when they're applying for roles?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's it's really, rather than kind of focusing on what you don't have, it's thinking about what the employer's looking for and aligning, what your skills are to that. A lot of the time it is it's more in the story than in the the kind of your CV sort of can be a timeline, and this is what I've done and this is what I've studied, but it's the covering letter and that that sort of interest in working for the company that kind of joins all of that up. I think that data is certainly the learners that we're seeing coming through the programme are aware that this is there's a new data opportunity here, and so have taken quite strategic steps to develop the skills that they think employers are looking for, and I think even that is a really great sign for employers to see that somebody's actually taking some steps in terms of their own upskilling and their own development to transition, because that's half the it's the translational piece, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's cover the last question we had in from Gordon, and I'll post this to yourself, Matt, first, and then get a quick input from Gulsen, because we've got a couple of minutes left. So how do you feel, Matt, that remote working will affect our ability to learn on the job, especially, which is a really important point, people at the beginning of their career, so they maybe never worked in an office with people before, and suddenly they're stuck at home?
Yeah, I wish I had good news on this one. I think it's going to make it harder, quite a lot harder. I think a lot of the ease of learning how to get things done at a company is casual conversations with people over lunch and things like that. And I think it's much easier to ask silly questions when you can just say, what button do I press on this screen here? And I just think it's really hard to do that regularly and repeatedly in a remote context. So I think you've just got to be really deliberate and intentional about, hey, for the next hour, we're just going to share a screen together and we'll just talk over what I'm clicking on, what I'm doing, that kind of thing. So I think possibly do your best to get somebody who's willing to help you do those things, but then maybe, accept, I think it's going to be more difficult.
I see Gulsen nodding your head to that. So just, I think I'll assume that you agree with that, and maybe just skip on, because there's one thing I wanted to do just to wrap up with 2 minutes left, and it was to get your own personal recommendations. So if there's one learning resource that is your go-to learning resource that you would like to share with the people on the call, just very briefly, what is it and how would they go and find it? So let's start with yourself, Gulsen.
Well, I'm going to be a bit untraditional, and I'll just say other people are the best learning resources, really. The people you're working with, even if your roles seemingly are not connected or you're not, working on the same thing, really asking people, oh, what do you think about this? How can we tackle this? So that diversity in perspectives from learning.
Oh, I think we just dropped Gulsen there right at the end. Let's move on because we've got a couple of seconds left. Anna, your go-to resource.
I'm just going to do a blatant plug for the Data Skills for Work skills portal, where we've got courses listed by category and level of data literacy.
Okay, thanks, Anna. And Dave?
I would just say, local, if you can find local or virtual meetup groups, or community interest groups, that's a good way of finding those like-minded people to bounce ideas off of, or, see approaches that others are taking to similar problems.
Yeah, just like kind of Gulsen was recommending there. And Matt, what about yourself? Go-to resource?
I'm going to go rogue and basically say you can download all of the UK house price sales since 1995 online, or any other data set that's big and interesting. You can do all the data analysis you want on it, find interesting things, publish them as part of a blog post. It's all there. You just got to go do it.
Great, thanks, Matt. So we're right bang on time. So we're at 20 to 5. So Thank you, Matt and Gulsen and Dave and Anna for joining us today for our first monthly community session. Thank you for everybody who's joined as well and participated as well. We'll take your names. If you want to drop us an email with address, we will send you some socks. And again, as we go through this, any feedback from today's session on things that you'd like us to cover in the future or different formats you'd like us to try, please get in contact, as we're doing a lot of experimentation in this area, and let us know. And on behalf of myself and everybody at Data Lab, thank you for joining us and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Bye-bye.